Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 387 of A Yank on the Footy. I'm Craig Wessels, coming to you from Sandusky, Ohio, and I'm glad you're tuning in, and hope you enjoy this chat as we get ready to discuss the games of Round 7, the ANZAC round, and we're going to talk a little bit about ANZAC Day and kind of, retell the story of one of my closest mates in Australia that I look forward to meeting in person someday. Um, I've tried to convince him to come to Buffalo in the wintertime for a Buffalo Bills football game, but he's told me that he would need several parkas and 6 or 8 pairs of gloves to leave Queensland to head to snowy Buffalo in December for a football game. But before we get into talking about Anzac Day, we need to talk a little bit about what we've seen happen thus far. And again, for those of you who did not check out my tips from last week, 2 weeks ago I went 8-1. I got my own team wrong. Last week I got my own team right, but only 2 other games. In fact, I did a mid-round recap, and I changed a couple of my tips. I think I had Tim Shue, the boxer, winning one game last weekend, along with the Sri Lankan national cricket team and the New England Patriots of the NFL, because I figure I had as good a shot of having them win a game as the tips that I was making, because they were just terrible this past week. But we're basically a quarter of the way through, and I'm not a horse racing fan. I'm allergic to horses, but I figure we should make a horse racing reference. What's that I hear? There's the horn. We're going to get started here. And here they come around the first turn. And right now, I would say if we were to break the clubs down into 4 different categories, okay? Not likely to be playing finals, but there are some signs that they can make life miserable for other clubs. And of course, we have clubs there. If you saw my preview for the season back, for the entire season back at the beginning of the year, I excluded the Eagles and the Tigers from having a shot at even playing finals. I kind of locked them into the final 2 spots. And Richmond is basically telling me, hey, you might be wrong about that. Of course, Melbourne's whispering in my ear the same thing as well. But I do have Richmond, Melbourne, and the West Coast Eagles in this spot. And unfortunately, one of the clubs that I did tip to play finals this year, the North Melbourne Kangaroos, have sequestered themselves away in this position as well. Now, I have to tell you, of these clubs, 2 of them, I think if I was a supporter of 2 of these clubs, I would be looking at things as being the glass at least half full. Maybe one of them, it's one of those little dribble glasses. We had those as a kid that were basically, they had taken a regular glass, but they had, it was like a trick glass where they had kind of just carved just a tiny pinhole in the side of the glass so the liquid inside would leak out slowly, like a drip at a time. And it was something you would give to a friend just to kind of mess with them. With technology, what it is today, and people setting drinks down by computers, we wouldn't want to do that sort of thing. I think the Roos are kind of in that situation because their glass is kind of half full, but it's leaking a little bit. The D's, I think the D's are at a position where they're kind of at their first step of realizing that this group of players they have right now, the leadership they have, may not be the ones that are taking them to their next finals game. And I hate to say that for D supporters. I know it was a long time between premierships, but that just may be reality. And we did see a bit of a pulse out of West Coast this past week. Okay. We did see a bit of a pulse. And, I got to tip my cap to the Richmond Tigers, because the Richmond Tigers have been playing some pretty solid football. Adam Uze's got this club playing hard. Are they going to win a lot of games? I don't think so. But I think they're going to make other teams' lives miserable. I think all 4 of these could do that. I think that if there's one that I think if they could figure out how to actually stop their opponent from scoring, I think they could find themselves pushing up the ladder. Maybe not making the 8 now, but I think North Melbourne could find themselves winning another half dozen or so games, which is where a lot of people thought they would be this year anyway, winning 7 or 8 games. But they need to learn how to stop other clubs from scoring. So that's not likely to be playing finals, but will be showing signs and making other clubs miserable. Now, as far as the clubs that I have in the need to begin to make their moves soon, and it may not be possible for them because of some extenuating circumstances here. And in this list, in this group, I have the Bulldogs, Port Adelaide, the Carlton Blues, the Sydney Swans, Essendon, and St. Kilda. Not in any particular order. Okay, I'm not ranking them saying where I think they're going to finish. I just listed those 6 right there. I think the Bulldogs, horrible news with Sam Darcy and his injury, and this club. The fact that they've won 3 games so far this year already, with their list looking like an episode of MASH, the TV show, a MASH unit with so many injuries. I have to tip my cap to the club because they're playing their guts out, and they're just so beat up. And it didn't get any better, although they did get Bontempelli back this past week. Port Adelaide's been playing pretty decent football. Just got to see if they can continue doing it. Of course, Carlton, a lot of injuries there as well. Same with the Swans. The Bombers lost, I think, a real key cog to their club with Sam Draper going down with his Achilles injury. Todd Goldstein, a great plug in the ruck position, but you wonder, and we'll talk about this when I get into the tips, will they be able to have the same kind of spark and energy on the ground with him as opposed to with Sam Draper? And I think we can safely say that, at the taps, he's going to be fine, but moving around the ground, Todd Goldstein is probably at the point where he's seen the best of his career. And that's not to take anything away from him at all. He's had a fine career. And the Saints, again, a few injuries, they're still waiting to get Max King back. But they have made some pretty decent strides even without him there. They found other ways to score. They got wiped out this past week, which we'll talk about here in a moment as well. But this is a group right here that I think they could all play finals still, but things are going to have to go their way. If I had to say of that group right there, which one do I think has the best shot of being in the 8? I think I would probably go with Port Adelaide on this one right now. I really do. I think there's so much talent there with Port Adelaide that I think they could possibly find their way in there. And then we get to the 3 clubs that I have, and they continue to prove it to us. They're proving it to us, but they need to continue it. Okay, they're playing very good football, but they need to keep it up. Well, maybe they're not playing such great football because one of them let one get away this last week. That's Fremantle. And I also have the Adelaide Crows, and I've got the Gold Coast Suns in here as well. I know Gold Coast is sitting at number 3 on the ladder, but again, their early draw, this first turn of this horse race, was maybe one of the easier draws. And I think we could argue they let a game get away against the Tigers this past week. Game they probably should have won. And they're going to be going home to play their second home game of the season at People's First Stadium here coming up this weekend. And, Adelaide, again, a club that can score a ton of points. They found a way to win in crappy weather this past week against a club that had a big laid out in Jesse Hogan, which, if you're doing the math there, folks, there are 5 clubs left that I think that are the ones that are leading at the quarter post or quarter pole. Again, I've never been to a horse race. I think it's the quarter post, quarter pole, whatever it is, one of those 2. But again, no particular order. The Giants, the Lions, the Pies, the Hawks, and the Cats. And I don't think there would be a lot of disagreement with those being, or from a lot of people anyway, with those being the top 5 sides in the comp. Some people may want to put Gold Coast in there, and I could certainly see that argument. Some people may want to put Adelaide in there. I could certainly see that argument. Okay, you could possibly plug them in there if you wanted to and swap out maybe the Giants because they dropped a game, maybe the Cats because they've lost a couple, maybe Hawthorn because they've lost 2 in a row. I don't think you can put the Pies and the Lions there yet, even though the Lions got crushed by Collingwood this past week. But I just think that these are probably going to be your 5 clubs are going to be battling for your top 4 spots. Could the Suns and Crows find themselves in the top 4? Absolutely. And let's be honest, Fremantle is way too talented a side to not be playing finals. That club should be playing finals this year. And that's not just because I tipped them to be in the grand final this year. Okay. Allowing me to replace this flag over here with a new one that says a 5 there instead of a 2, hopefully. Right there. Yeah, there you go if you're on video. So, that's kind of where I think we are in this horse race right now. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. We'll come back and look at this when we get to about round 13 or so, and we get into the next series of a half dozen games or that sort to make sure that we have an idea of where we're standing at that point in time. And I think we'll learn a lot then. So, again, it is ANZAC round. And yes, I will remove my cap while I'm referring to that. And I want to wish everyone in Australia the absolute best, lest we forget, of course. But for those of you who may not have heard the story, again, I have a mate that lives up in Queensland, used to live on Russell Island off the coast of Brisbane. He's since moved several hundred kilometers inland. Um, just bought himself a new car about a week and a half ago, which is going to be delivered soon. And it's a North American muscle car. He bought himself a Corvette. And I guess they did the conversion kit to move the steering system and such to the opposite side of the car, but everything else is original in it. So I'm really looking forward to seeing his pictures of him cruising around in that. But I'm talking about my friend Orville Gibson. And the reason I'm bringing up Orville in this discussion right now is that since we're talking about ANZAC Day, Orville is an Australian Army veteran. I think he's a hero, quite frankly. And if you go back to listen to my episodes that I had him on the podcast, if you've not listened to my interviews with Orville Gibson, I strongly encourage you to go back and listen to those. I'll put the links to those episodes, or at least I'll put the episode numbers in the show notes, so you can check those out. But he did some things that were just tremendous while he served Australia. But he's continuing to do something tremendous as well. And there is a gentleman who was of great service to Australia during the First World War, and specifically at Gallipoli. And this is a young man by the name of Private William Billy Singh. And Private Singh was from Claremont, and he was born of an Australian mother and a Chinese father, and in the late 1800s, if I'm not mistaken. And I think I'm going to find the actual 1886. Okay. He was brought up in Claremont and Proserpine in rural Queensland. The war broke out in 1914. Of course, he rushed to enlist. He was a member of the 5th Light Horse Regiment, sent to Egypt initially in 1914 and then into Gallipoli in May of 1915. Now, if you've not heard the story of Billy Singh, and I'll get back to why Orville is somebody I mentioned already in this discussion. Billy was given the nickname of the murderer or the assassin. And the estimates are that Billy was responsible for the deaths, and I've seen two conflicting numbers, of like around 150 to over 201, I believe, confirmed kills of Turkish soldiers at Gallipoli. And he was just a tremendous marksman. And he went ahead and took out a Turkish crack shot, a Turkish sniper by the name of Abdul the Terrible in August of 1915. And by the end, Billy had actually shot and killed him. And they shelled his position quite a bit after that. Now he came home after the war. He was recommended for, but did not receive the military medal for his actions. But he came back. He passed away in 1946, I believe it was, 1948, at a very young age of 57. So that would have been, let's see, 57. He's born in 1886. He's 23, 1944, I think, something like that. But he is buried in Brisbane at the Lutwyche Cemetery. And there's a huge obelisk. And I have links to these stories about him in the show notes. And I have a link to the memorial, which is basically to commemorate all Chinese American, I'm sorry, Chinese Australian soldiers of World War One. And every year for the last couple of decades now, my friend Orville has traveled to, and it was much easier for him to do this when he lived on Russell Island. He would travel to this cemetery and he would on Anzac Eve. So he's probably there right now. I've not spoken with him. He's not, I checked to see if he was online. He was not online. So I'm going to guess that he's there right now, where he would polish the obelisk and he would replace the Australian flag and he would spend the night graveside at Billy Singh's grave, to pay respect for him. Now, if you happen to be in the Brisbane area, this is on Kitchener Road, the Lutwyche Cemetery in Lutwyche Cemetery, Kedron 4031. But to me, this is just an awesome thing that Orville does to remember this Australian hero, and it's his way of commemorating and paying tribute to other military veterans, and those lost in battle, the Anzacs. It's his way to do that, and I got the utmost respect for him for doing this. Okay, so I really wanted just to tell that story, and I know I've told it before during the Anzac episode, and it's just it's awesome to yeah. He died in May of 1943. As it said, he died alone in his room with 5 shillings in his pocket at the boarding house that he was living in on the west end of Brisbane. And it's and this is an issue that you know, I am a military veteran. I didn't do anything special at all. I served in the United States Navy. My son serves in the United States Navy. My father-in-law served in the Navy. My brother-in-law, the United States Air Force. But I'm no hero by any stretch of the imagination. But I think some of the things that Orville did that we spoke about during the podcast a couple of years ago, I think he is a hero. And Billy Singh sure as hell is a hero. So if you've not heard the story of Billy Singh, if you've not read about him, I strongly encourage you to check out the links that are in the show notes and read up on him a little bit, because he is an Australian hero and should absolutely be remembered. Okay. So, that being said, Orville, I hope you have a good evening. I hope you stay warm. I know you like it when the weather's warmer there. But let's go ahead and jump into my tips for this week. So, first of all, Melbourne will be hosting Richmond on Thursday evening. So, in just about 12 hours from when I'm recording this, both of them got wins this past week. I think Simon Goodwin, started the Demons rebuild right before our very eyes. Fritch and May will be back in this week. Noah Balta will be starting his court-ordered absences due to his curfew restrictions. I'm not sure. I guess I'm okay with. I mean, because he's kind of being sort of suspended from playing a number of games. I mean, his case has now been adjudicated. So if he's able to play, if the schedules work out, that's fine. I don't remember how long this is going to last. I know that they've not announced starting times for many of the games in like rounds 18 through 24. I think it's dependent upon how clubs are performing and that sort of thing. Because I remember that, when I was looking and making my trip this year, that was one of the key issues, was whether or not, what time games were going to be taking place. Because I was going to try to maximize my ability to see as many games as I possibly could. So he's going to miss a handful of games here. This is a tough game to call, because, Melbourne has the capability of playing a very good game. There still is a lot of talent on this side, but they've been, as I think I've discussed previously, they've played a lot of hero ball. I've got the ball. It's time for me to go score. It's not time for us to go score. It's time for me to go score. If they can figure out how to resolve that and share, who knows? Melbourne could have a resurgence this year. But that being the case, I'm going to go with the young upstart Richmond Tigers to win this one by 8 points. Okay. Richmond has really impressed me with how hard they're playing. They've been very hard-nosed. Um, so I'm really interested to see how that one turns out. So I'll be up tomorrow morning for that, and I'm definitely going to get out for a walk. I'm going to try to get out and mow the grass before it gets dark tonight after I finish recording this because it's well, if you're on video, it's about that high right now. So then we get to the Friday night game at the MCG. Collingwood hosting Essendon. You know, awful news for the Bombers and for Sam Draper with his Achilles injury. I know he's coming off of contract. He's going to be a free agent at the end of this year. Just terrible news for him. Yeah, he's been having a great year. He's been proving some doubters wrong with his kicking abilities. Todd Goldstein is a very, very qualified substitute to plug and play. Okay. But I wonder how much does he have to offer? He's not going to be able to cover the ground that Sam Draper does. I don't think he's going to be able to do that. Can Reece Stanley's recent performance coming back into the Cat side after a few weeks down in the VFL, could that give us some indication of how Goldstein could play? Maybe. I think comparable ages. The Pies, they have muscled and stomped. Yeah, stomped. Jared Berry's looking right at you, Nick Dacos. Yeah. Twice, right? Stomped right on his foot. That's chicken shit. You're too good of a player to be doing that sort of thing. You're too good of a player to be doing that. Okay. They've muscled and stomped their way to the top of the ladder. I did not have them playing in the 8 this year. They're proving me wrong. Now I have to wonder, can they keep the calendar at bay? Can they keep pushing the months at the end of the year back? Try to roundabout way saying that they're going to stay young, if you will. Possibly. But I do think the Pies are going to win this one. I've got Collingwood winning this one by 18 points. I just think they're too good right now. And then we got Fremantle hosting Adelaide out at Optus. Both these clubs have finals aspirations. In fact, I've got Fremantle playing in the grand final this year. Could they still get there? Absolutely. But right now they're sitting 3-3. They're 9th on the ladder. It isn't like they're battling the D's and the Roos to get out of the bottom 4. That being said, if they gave up 100+ points to Melbourne, I wonder what the Crows are going to be able to do to them. Because let's be honest, the Crows are a hell of a lot better on offensive side than the Melbourne Demons are. Okay. Now, I imagine the Crows are going to find themselves enjoying what should be a much better weather week for them out in Perth this week. I'm going with Adelaide to win this one by 13 points. I just think that they're too good of a side right now. And maybe they had some flaws exposed with Fremantle, and that's going to work out to their advantage. And then we had to marvel for St. Kilda and Brisbane. And the Saints, they got thrashed last week by the Bulldogs. Okay. Now, this is a better side than what they showed in that contest. And most clubs that are getting beat by 50+ points. We're talking about Brisbane. They got beat by 50+ points against the Magpies at home. They got embarrassed by them. At this point, I think both of these clubs have something to prove. But that being said, I think both of them rebound, but one of them has to lose. I'm not going to tip a game where the two clubs are going to draw. I'm not doing that. Okay. But I think that as they bounce back or rebound this week, I think that the Lions are going to bounce just a little bit higher. So I'm going to go with the Lions to win this one in a close squeaker by 9 points. So Brisbane by 9 over St. Kilda. Okay. And then we got Port Adelaide hosting North Melbourne. Now the Roos, they've fallen into a rut and they're struggling to stop anybody from scoring. They really are. The Hinckley Farewell Tour is back home again. I think that to me, this is going to be a slugfest. It's going to be a track meet. Okay. This is going to be, if you watch the NBA All-Star games in recent years, and I didn't pay any attention to the one this year, but I think they changed up some rules on it. But a lot of the NBA All-Star games, it's almost like the NFL Pro Bowl game. It's kind of like bullfighters, with the red cape going Olay and letting the bull go by. It's kind of how they're playing defense. That's what the Roos are doing right now. But I think both these clubs are, I think are both going to score over 100 points this week. I think the Roos are going to score a ton of points just because they're capable of it. But I'm going to go with the power to win it by 15. So there, 115 to 100 is my tip on the final score. Okay, 115 to 100, Port Adelaide on this one. And the Giants are hosting the Bulldogs up in Canberra. Fortunately for GWS, the weather in Adelaide last week helped to wash the bad taste out of their mouths after that lousy performance. Again, tip your cap to the Crows for holding them to less than 35 points. Jesse Hogan will hopefully be back this week. The Bulldogs played a great game, but they're going to be without Sam Darcy for the next few months. Um, I saw it posted in articles here recently, but I talked to uh, Rick Shabani, a friend of mine, lives out in Los Angeles, who plays for the LA Dragons, and I asked. It was even the day before. I'm not going to show you the chat logs or anything like that, but we did discuss what became news about whether or not AFL clubs should be able to terminate players' contracts if they're not living up to it. Because right now the Bulldogs, they're paying Jamar Ugle-Hagan to do whatever the hell he's doing, but it ain't playing football. And now that you've lost Sam Darcy, you certainly need that young man back out there. And they're having to pay whatever amount of money they're paying him to not play. I'm sorry. I think that there should be some way, if they decide that they want to do so, that maybe there should be something that they can bring in a new law that allows the league to permit a club to basically, put them on the disqualified list or something like that, to where they can suspend his pay and bring in another player at the midseason draft to basically take his spot on the list, because he's certainly not using his spot on the list. And they need him now more than ever. They really do. Aaron Naughton has had a decent career of kicking goals, but he's going to have to be the guy now until JUH comes back, if he comes back. And are they going to welcome him back? I don't know. If you're a Bulldog supporter, do you want to see him out there in, say, round 9 or 10 after he gets himself back into playing shape? Or are you ready to just, to cut bait and just say, I'm done with this kid? And I know I'm being way more harsh than I should be, because, we do talk about all the mental health aspects of things. But there should be some sort of a carve out for the club to not have to have that salary cap just be wasted, whether they're able to suspend it or spend additional money on bringing another player into the midseason draft. And this is why I think maybe sooner rather than later the AFL is probably going to go to some sort of a midseason trade again, because maybe it's just the Bulldogs. Maybe it's the Bulldogs family, if you will, that he feels he needs to get away from. And I have no idea. I'm speculating. I'm just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks here. Okay. Um, but if you're the Bulldogs, when do you say enough is enough with this? I don't know. I don't know. But I'm going to go with the Giants to win this one. I think it's going to be competitive. I've got GWS winning this one by 17 points. Okay. And then we head back up to People's First Stadium for the Suns, playing their second game of the year at home against the beat up Sydney Swans, who have a lot of injuries in their own part. They're in an unfamiliar spot right now. They are 2-4, sitting on the 14th spot on the ladder. Suns are sitting at third with the highest percentage in the comp. They're coming off an absolute laying of an egg against a very determined Tiger squad. And those Tigers that were still around from when Damian Hardwick was coaching them wanted that win badly. They absolutely wanted that win. And again, I applaud the Richmond Tigers for taking that win away from the Suns. I do. Now, the Suns, I think they're going to bounce back. The Swans, they're beat up. I'm going with Gold Coast to win this one by 11. Okay. And then we've got Carlton hosting Geelong at the MCG. The Blues bounced back. They beat two lesser opponents the last couple of weeks. The Cats, they dodged a bullet last week. Let's just put it that way, okay? They beat a very good Hawthorn club, and Hawthorn left a lot of points laying out on the grass last week. They did. Okay, they left an awful lot of points on the ground. Jack Gunston is way too good a player to have missed as many shots as he did. I'm glad he did, but he's too good to have done that. That game could have gone either way very easily. Okay. The Cats could be very easily sitting at 3-3, and Hawthorn could be sitting at 5-1. Okay. Had that gone the other way. So that being said, I am going to go with the Cats to win this one. It's going to be hard fought. I think that the Blues are still a little banged up. The Cats are going to have to figure out how do they function without arguably the best ball distributor. If you're thinking from a basketball analogy, the best point guard or one of the best point guards in the AFL in Brian Myers, who's going to miss at least next week, probably the Collingwood game, because that would fall on day 12 of the concussion protocol. And I want him to be healthy. Okay. If he doesn't play against Collingwood, that's just one less foot that Nick Dacos is going to have a chance to stomp on. Okay. Um, yeah, I had to bring it up again while I was here. So I did. So Cats by 13. And then we got Hawthorn playing West Coast at Marvel. And I'll be honest, I think this is going to be a lot more competitive than people think. What is it? A 50 plus point spread right now that Hawthorn's favored by over 50 points. I don't think it's going to be that wide a space at all. In fact, I'm still tipping Hawthorn to win, but by 25 points. Okay. Andrew McQualter has lit a fire under this club. They played hard last week against Essendon and almost walked out of there with a win. They did. I was very encouraged by the way that they played. Um, I know we don't really count moral victories, if you will, or honorable losses in the AFL. There's not a category for that. There's too many stats. You know, I'm saying there's too many. There's a lot of stats in footy. We don't need to have an HL stat. This is honorable loss for a club. Okay, where they give them like what 1/100th of a point or something like that for hey, you got close. We're gonna throw you a bone. That's kind of like that whole everybody gets a trophy kind of thing that we do here in sports with young kids nowadays, where they have local soccer leagues where they don't keep score because they don't want the kids to be concerned about losing, but damn well every kid on that field knows that their team hasn't scored a goal all summer long, and the parents are thinking about, can we actually lift up the turf and have the ball roll towards our goal just one time? But we're not keeping score. Everybody's having fun. Those kids are miserable. They know they're getting their butts kicked. So that being said, I think Hawthorne's going to win this one by about 4 goals. I don't think it's going to be the 10 goal margin or 9 goal margin that the people who are prognosticating are believing that it's going to be. Okay, so there's my tips for this week. Again, purely for entertainment purposes only. Do not wager any money based upon anything that I have said. Okay. Um, if the companies that do that sort of thing, if they have a wager that says, "Hey, is Craig Wessels from a Yank on the Footy a knucklehead?" Yes or no? And you can make a buck or two by tipping yes on that, then probably I would say go ahead and place that bet, because guess what? Yeah, I'm a knucklehead, but don't wager any money based upon what I said about any of these games. I'm doing this purely for entertainment purposes. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. Again, I tip my cap to all of you Australian military veterans and family members of military veterans who did not make it home. Enjoy the somber weekend. Enjoy the football. And ladies and gentlemen, remember, you can find everything about the podcast over at my website, ayankonthefooty.com. I do hope you'll get on the mailing list. Okay, so that when new episodes come out, you'll have them in your inbox very soon. If you're on YouTube, I hope you'll subscribe. Up at 260 subscribers on YouTube, not 260,000, 260. So it's growing a little bit. Still trying to find the time to get episodes up on Rumble as well. I've got a handful of older ones up there, but not nearly enough. Mostly going to be interview ones that end up going over there. If you want to help out the podcast, a review would be fantastic. You can also click that buy me a coffee button to help me keep the lights on, to help defray some of the cost of running the podcast, which, I mean, it's not like owning a boat type of an expense as a hobby, but it's getting up there a little bit. So if you want to help out, you certainly could do that. That would be greatly appreciated. Tell your friends about it as well. If you know somebody who'd be a great guest, I'd love to set something up and talk to them. I have a couple irons in the fire for interviews. One of them is a big one here in North America, based upon the recent sale of Fox Footy to DAZN. I'm waiting to hear back from communications director for DAZN here in North America about setting up an interview with somebody from the company to discuss what this impact of their takeover of Fox Footy is going to mean for footy here. Well, first in Australia, but then also for us here in North America as well, because it's getting harder and harder to find things. And they could do so much more. As I've always said, get 10% of us interested in the game. I'm sorry, you get 1% of us. That's what, 10% of, 1% of us is 10% of Australia's population. Again, I'm not a math teacher. So folks, if you're at my website, check out my socials. They're all linked there. YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Find me at yank_on X. If you want to reach me by email, ayankonthefooty@gmail.com. Folks, if you need to talk to somebody, please don't hesitate to reach out. Okay. Um, let your friends know if you need to speak to them. If there's an issue that you need to be dealing with. I've been battling some things, and today was a really tough day for me. Um, Feeling kind of useless, realizing the piles of things that I need to be plowing through. My wife had her second to last chemo treatment today. Um, so we're almost there. Okay, we're almost there. I've got a couple more days of break before my I go back to school. I'll actually be traveling to the state of California next week for a couple of days, so I'm looking forward to that as well. But again, check up on your friends. If you need to talk to somebody, those numbers in the show notes of every single episode of the podcast. As always, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your continued kind words and support. Leave a review, share the podcast, and as always, may your dribble kick never hit the post. And this is episode 387. Find me on my socials, get subscribed, okay? Share it. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, cheers and goodbye.